Morning guys, welcome back to another episode of Barham Engines. It's a Friday episode and the weather is looking great for the weekend. So guys, before we go into the workshop, see what we got going on, if you haven't yet, I know some of you hate the begging, but if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell guys, it helps us greatly.
Right, so apparently Lee's got something very important going on with this Cosworth.
I have indeed, mate. Right, so the story is with this is the blue Cosworth for
Kev, isn't it?
That's the one, Kevin. When we stripped this, someone had put one of the thrust washers, now this is like one of the things we've always been paranoid about, they put one side of the thrust washers in back to front. Okay, now fortunately, I don't think it had run very long, because if it had, what it tends to do, if you put it in back to front, you've got the hard steel backing rubbing up against the crank, and it tends to just trash the bloody crank, and then you get excess end flow and it wrecks the block. But it didn't get anything like that far. But what it did do, we noticed that there was one side of the crank was a little tiny bit scored, obviously where the steel's been rubbing up against it. So
right.
John's had to grind the crank. What I've got him to do is obviously just tickle up the faces, clean up the faces of the thrusts, okay? So it's not disastrous, he's literally just tickled up there. So basically what we do on these Cosworths, or the Pintos, they do standard size thrust washers, okay? But they also do plus 2 thou and plus 5 thou. We've managed to get hold of plus 5 thou. And what I mean by plus 5 thou is each washer each side is 5 thou thicker.
Right.
So if you put all of these in, it would close the thrust up.
Takes
10
up
thou.
that clearance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we like to do is run about 5 thou end float on these. So what I've done is I've ordered a set of 5 thous and a set of standards. The crank's all in with the bearings, etc. Everything's clean now. And what I've done is I've put a standard set of thrusts in either side without leaving the cap off for a minute, okay? And what I'm going to do is just measure the end float. So we've put our metric DTI gauge up against the front, and basically if you take it from there, it's moved 0.2, all right? Yeah. 0.2, obviously an imperial is 8 thou. So we need to close that gap up. So basically John's tickled 3 thou off one side.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is close that up 3 thou. So what we're going to do is take one side, just one side, leave the standard in one side, and I'm going to surface grind 2 thou off there, off the back, on the top and the bottom.
So you take that off the back then, not the copper side.
That's right, yeah. So the one with the tag is obviously goes in the cap, the plain one goes in the bottom. So I'm just going to take 2 thou off there, and that's going to close the gap up 3 thou, and then in theory we should be running 5 thou of end float. So I'm going to go and pop them on the surface grinder, mate.
Right, cool.
And then see what we got. The reason I took it off the back and not the front is because this this layer here is very thin, so we don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go and pop them in there.
You got those.
Right. So we put the shim in one side, kept the standard in the other, and if you mark where that is. That there is 4 thou, which is 0.1, and it's just over that, so that is 5 thou. So jobs are good, and mate.
Cool.
So what we'll do is get the cap on, put the other side in, obviously check it again, make sure that's all right, and then we're all good to go. Get this thing torqued up. Right, so now we've got the thrusts perfect on this. Got about 5 thou of end float, which is ideal. Next step is to get the mains caps on. So I've checked it, double checked it with the cap on the centre that holds the thrusts. Still got the same end float, perfect. So what I've done now is obviously we've measured the journals on the mains and the housings in the block. Everything's good. You see it turns absolutely perfect, free by hand, but I've just checked this, a final one with plastic gauge as I normally do. So I've torqued up number 4 cap, and going by the chart here, you can see that is pretty much 2 thou of running clearance, which is absolutely perfect on the mains. And so what I'm going to do is just clean that off now, stick that number 4 on, retorque them all up, make sure it all turns free by hand, which it should do, and jobs are good, and we'll turn it over then. And the next step is the rods and pistons and getting the piston crown heights correct. But firstly, I'm going to put them on the mill and do the valve cutouts. Okay guys, so I just thought I would take a minute to show you this very unusual cylinder head. Now this is off a Triumph Dolomite Sprint. So it's the same sort of design, although this is 16 valve, it's a similar head bolt pattern to the V8 Stag, where they use a very unusual sort of method of bolting the head down. But like I say, this one is 16 valve. The only thing that's obscure and different about this cylinder head to the majority of other 16 valve heads is you've got on one side, so this will be on the inlets, you've got the camshaft over bucket, you've got a shim under bucket, so that there is pretty standard for, you know, a 16 valve head. But then on this side you've got a shim over the valve that sits in the cap here, but then you've got a rocker system. So this here is partially a cam cap that holds the inlet cam in, and then the head bolt goes through here, and then obviously this rocker shaft runs through here and holds a set of rockers. So one side's rockers, one side's just standard cam over bucket, which is, as I say, very unusual. Now, when I mentioned the head bolt layout on this, really unusual, and to be honest with you, a terrible idea, I think. Great when it's probably great when it's new and the theory is fine, but you've got a set of bolts here, head bolts here, that are at 90 degrees to the head face, as head bolts should be and normally are. So they bolt directly down, obviously thus torquing the head directly down into the block. But then here, that go through this, that hold the rocker shaft, they go down at, I'm not sure about the angle, but you're talking, well, anything but 90 degrees is not a great idea, because all it's trying to do is pull the head over that way. And not only that, on the Stags, if you, they are studs, they're not bolts, and they basically, because they're so close to the aluminium, they corrode over time, and then you're meant to wind them out, undo these, and then take the head off, but that never works. We've had Stags in here before where we've literally had to hammer the head up to the point where you can just get a hacksaw blade in and cut all the studs. It's an absolutely horrendous idea. But this one is in very, very good condition. Obviously, it's been got off without much damage at all. If it's just come off, you know, come straight off, I don't know. But no, it's I do like these Dolomite Sprints. The only flaw is obviously that head bolt design, but very unusual setup, and it's lovely to see one and have one in to go through, really. So this one is a full overhaul. So we've obviously done our usual, cut the valve seats, done the sleeve the guides, and Isaac is just about to set up the valve clearances. So yeah, not very often you'll see one of these heads now, to be honest, guys. Right, so the Cosworth here for Andrew, and yes, that is Andrew, not Matthew. So obviously the head has been fully ported, looking wonderful. We've gone 25.5 on one side, 20 on the inlet, 24.5 on the exhaust, and you can see we've just given it 1 2 thou cut, and it's This is basically how bent this head was originally. So just going to give it another 2 thou cut, guys, and see if it cleans. Right then, guys, I have here an oil pump, and this is an oil pump from Kevin's Cosworth engine, the blue one over there. Now, I've stripped and checked this pump, as I always do. Very, very rarely are the pumps any good. They're normally scored and what have you. Now, this one is a pretty trick pump. Obviously, it's four-wheel drive. The four-wheel drives at the minute are hard to get and they're very expensive. So what I normally do is just have a quick look at them. You never know, they might be in perfect order. Now, on the very rare occasion, you have this instance where there is no scores or anything on the body of this pump. I've stuck a bore gauge down there. It measures exactly what it should do. It's absolutely perfect. The only thing that was scored, the bottom is really, really good. I've measured the height compared to the top. There's a couple of tiny little scores, but nothing that's going to make any difference at all. The lid was a little bit scored, but you do sometimes find this where on the outside edge, not too bad, but the face is pretty scored up on the internal moving bits. We've got pitting on this. So what I'm going to do, guys, if I go down the road to Ultra Parts and get myself a cheap Pinto pump, which have got the same internals, measure exactly the same design, I'm going to fit them into this. I've put this on the lathe. Fortunately, we've got a nice lug on the back here which I could hold. I've clocked it in, face that, so we've got a perfect face on the lid now. I'm going to pop those internals into there, and then we've got a nice fresh high pressured four-wheel drive oil pump. Probably saved the guy a good 150 odd quid. And yeah, like I say, not very often I do that, but there's no point just sticking a brand new pump in there at great expense if you can salvage this one that's going to be exactly the same. So yeah, you know that normally I wouldn't do that, but why not rescue a perfectly good pump, guys, with just some new internals, bit of a rebuild, and job's a good one. Save the man some money. Right, Houston, we have a bit of a problem. So, for all you regular watchers of the channel, you know how many Cosworths we do. We do a video on a lot of them. You know how in-depth we get with them, how careful we are, how accurate we are. But we did an engine a couple of months ago for a customer called Kyle. This was for his Escort Cosworth. And Kyle, fortunately, he's a really chilled out guy, dead laid back. But Kyle, unfortunately, from the word go on this engine, which I'll be honest with you, I've never had on another Cosworth, it's been using oil. He's done about 1,500 miles. The car's sort of started to smoke, very fumey, and uses quite a lot of oil. We're talking about half a litre in 100 miles. So I've obviously, Kyle being really chilled out has helped matters no end because he's right up country. He's been good as gold. He's pulled the motor for me and got it back to me yesterday. It arrived about 12 o'clock because now is Friday. And I had this thing stripped by 2 o'clock. So what have we found, guys? Weirdly, not a lot. So first of all, everything looks good with the head gasket. The bores, you can see I have just run the deglazer down there. But to be honest with you, there was absolutely nothing wrong with them. There was no glaze there. It was the bottom end, the crank bearings and the crank and everything, it all looked absolutely perfect, really. If no one had told me that there was an issue with this and give it me to strip, I would strip it and say that it's running in absolutely beautifully. But the only thing is, I would say that it hasn't done the 1,500 miles it's done. So these are the pistons. To be honest with you, they all look pretty good. The thing is, with this, the symptoms were that it's burning oil across the board. So you can see on the top that it is pretty oily, a bit of carbon on there. Rings, obviously the first thing I've checked is the rings. One, make sure that they're all the right way up and they're in the right grooves, which they are. Secondly, I've checked the ring gaps. So we've got the top ring here. This is on piston number 1. So this second ring here, you can see has got like a dark coating on it. And right on the section that runs up against the bore, it looks like it is running in absolutely perfectly. And as I say, the ring gap is still as it was, but you can see on the cylinder head that it is very oily. We have had these valves out, and there's no oil behind the valves. We obviously did new guides on this. We've checked to make sure that there's no oil running down the side of the guide where it's had new ones in, which it hasn't, because you have to heat these heads before you remove the old guides, otherwise it can take aluminium out. So the next step, guys, we're a bit puzzled with this. We're going to send the turbo off to Vince, get him to check that out, make sure that the turbo's not an issue. We're obviously going to strip the head right out and just double check everything. We'll put new stem seals on, which it had anyway. So at the minute, guys, I'm sort of scratching my head over this. In situations like this, I'd almost prefer to have seen something, do you know what I mean? But as of yet, we haven't. So yeah, a genuine warranty comeback, guys, on one of the Cosworths. But another thing I'm going to be checking is the breather system, making sure that that's all working fine. But at this moment in time, I'm a little bit puzzled by it because everything looks absolutely fine to me. If I don't find anything else with the cylinder head, the only thing I can do, as I say, I've deglazed the bores, get another set of Marla rings, which those ones are, put them in and hope for the best. But yeah, it's a bit of a funny one, this. I've never had a Cosworth where it uses oil like that and smokes, you know. Usually they might use a little bit of oil for the first sort of 500 to 1,000 miles, but nothing like that. So a little bit mystified by this, guys. But I suppose the only thing we can do is do what we're doing, get it sorted ASAP for Kyle and get it back to him so he can get it in the car. Well, guys, that is all we got time for today. So join us on Monday, where we are hopefully going to be finding out what is the matter with that Cosworth engine and causing it to smoke and burn oil, etc. But until then, have a great weekend, enjoy the last bit of the summer, and we will see you Monday. Take care, guys.